Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is a video about why the theory of evolution is incorrect and kind of getting into the intricacies of how the conclusions were made by Darwin and what his theory is based upon. Because you're going to find that never does one type of creature become another creature. You're never going to see a lizard with feathers starting to grow out of its skin turn into a bird, generationally or otherwise. It's just never going to happen. And it's as though if the theory of evolution is real, that it just happened to come to a standstill before anybody could really witness what's going on, because we don't see today any creatures becoming another type of creature per se. What we do have and what Darwin documented was an issue of natural selection combined with the nature of DNA, in that the natural selection provides the scenario in which the DNA expresses itself and prevails. So what Darwin based his theories on, partially, if not fully, I studied this a long time ago, was the beaks of these finches, these birds that he would notice had differentiation between island to island as he was documenting these things. And he was theorizing that this development of the beak explained how these creatures were turning into other creatures, essentially, because the only thing he really documented was this micro evolution, which happens through natural selection. If you have and environmental factors. So if you have an environment in which there is a predator that is consuming a certain type of creature, and this creature has a variant between long-legged ones versus shorter-legged ones, or a certain colored ones that blend in versus a certain color pattern that would stick out, natural selection would provide a scenario in which the predator either gets the slower creature, gets the creature that sticks out and doesn't have the camouflage, whatever it is, and then that trait is taken out of the gene pool. So what you'll see is, as birds may be progressed from island to island, certain birds with a certain beak size or angulature to their beak, just as there's differentiation in the expression of humanity, certain birds maybe didn't make it, or didn't get as much to eat, or didn't interbreed because of whatever reason. They didn't make it. So whatever genetic expression was what came through based on the environment is what evolved. Microevolution is what happened to progress through generations to become what is today. You know what I'm saying? Like I said, if there's a predator out there catching all the let's say short people because they can't run as fast, and so all the long-legged people that can sprint are the last ones to be caught, and there's a giant predator like Africa per se, you could generationally have taller people in a certain area because the shorter people were just eaten. They couldn't run fast enough, and they were taken out of the gene pool. So selectively, you have taller people. It's not evolution. It's natural selection, and then it's the expression of the genetics in the environment that happened. But you will never see one creature becoming another. It's just simply a matter of natural selection. So it's super interesting to theorize. There's also, like, they base the theory of evolution on, like, the fossil record, they claim. But I mean, if you study the history of this earth based not just on religious text, which should be viewed as historical text and not poo-pooed as some religious. I look at religious doctrine simply for the historical contextual value most of the time, to be quite honest with you. So there's a lot of mystery and a lot of stuff. Even if you say the timeline is incorrect in the Bible, it's still something to take into consideration. And even if the timeline's off, you can just slide it over and get the gist without necessarily being deceived. There are just certain things you have to take into consideration. But the fossil record that they claim is going to show certain creatures is a matter of this flood happening, where everything on the earth was wiped from the planet, essentially, which it didn't really happen that way. But what was happening was, because there were Nephilim, they said giants before and after the flood, but these giants, the Nephilim, right, the descendants of these, there were giants that came down and bred with humankind, it's stated. But you could look at some Sanskrit texts and from India and still get a similar historical reference all around the world to these things happening. So it's not just in one particular religion that you find this, but so they came down, bred with humankind, had these giant offspring even, and maybe they're the people who were in Atlantis. Maybe they're the people who were the reason supposedly for this great flood, because what's the reason for the great flood? Genetic manipulation. Everything was being manipulated. Was there evolution going on? No. There was scientific laboratory setting manipulation of animals, manipulation of God's creation. If you understand what DNA is and what this game is, we're as a being incarnate into this body. We're in the middle of a game that we don't know who started. Along with the DNA, we can pass our DNA on to whoever we can interbreed with. Any human can interbreed. Any dog can interbreed. Think about this. But can I cross any plant? No, I can't. It comes down to specific genus, certain kingdoms. It comes down to the scientific classification, first of all, of the plant. And then they can cross certain plants, certain fish. For instance, can all fish be crossed? No. Can certain fish be crossed? Yes, to create a new species. But is that evolution, or is that where humans had to specifically go and intervene? And maybe it would have happened in a natural setting, but what I'm thinking about specifically is the cross between the lake trout and the brook trout that I know that they've created, that I know has been released into the gene pool in certain lakes in Colorado, Island Lake on the Grand Mesa being one of them. I've never caught one of these fish. I've fished for them and tried, but it was kind of a weak attempt. I wasn't fishing on the bottom, and I was fishing from shore. Didn't really expect to get anything because all the rainbow trout were killing my bait before it ever. But I fished that lake thinking, man, I'd love to hook up with one of these fish. But the point is, there's all that genetic understanding that really what that goes into is mastering DNA and the mastering of the genetics. Really, all the classification is the beginning of the interbreeding program, where evolution isn't real, but the intervention of the mixing of God's creation and the genetics, and I just call it God's creation. We don't know where it came from. It's like I can take paint, I can take a color, I can mix colors, I can create something you've never seen on the color palette, but who made the color in the first place? That's what the DNA is. Who gave all the DNA to create all the dogs? If it's genetic expression, they say from one wolf, all dogs came from one wolf. That's pretty damn good, because you're finding a lot of certain characteristics. I don't buy that, but I don't know. I think there were certain dogs, certain breeds on this planet somehow when the earth was maybe seeded. I think there was certain DNA being created on this planet, and whatever was left is what was left. But you got to think, where does the DNA come from? Is it all from the earth? Did it come from a mud puddle like they want you to think? Where did these colors come from? Or is the DNA maybe encapsulated, encoded, and maybe dropped off here? Maybe brought here? Have you ever considered like extinct species, right? And there's been instances where like mass herds of animals that are going extinct have been found living somewhere that's like baffling, like, whoa, We didn't realize in this pristine little environment there was a huge herd of this, or there was a group of these creatures living here and breeding and thriving that we didn't know about. And maybe there is off-planet intelligence trying to keep life alive for humanity. Maybe there are new species being introduced that we don't know about, or maybe there is interbreeding between things that are coming in contact that never have been in contact before. It's possible, as DNA is somewhere on this planet and spreads, as the planet warms, as creatures start moving farther and farther, maybe a certain mountain lion could breed with a black cat from down in Mexico, and you could get a different looking cat. Or maybe you could get certain, you know what I'm saying? It's genetic expression. But that's the whole point. You're not getting an absolutely new creature. Cat's not breeding with a dog and creating a cog. You know what I'm saying? That's not happening. But even the cryptid creatures repeating themselves, and tales of certain cryptids, and then like the Wampus cat, and then people seeing it and it being the same creature every time. These certain myths of werewolves, of anything, witches, they all repeating the same MO. It's like, it's more than just a myth of what people see out there. What about that DNA? It's very interesting to think about cryptid DNA, to think about what could be done with cryptid DNA, to think about if DNA is so coveted. It's just like, consider the DNA with like the black-eyed kids and the X-Files scenario of an interbreeding program with humanity and gray aliens, which isn't necessarily just an X-Files scenario, because that is a very real scenario that abductees all over the world report, that they're being used to essentially mother these fetuses that are then removed from their body after they've been a surrogate mother for these creatures, and that they've been introduced to these beings after they've been born, and they're half human, half gray alien. Stan Romanek, who's been framed by the government and put into prison, who is a UFO alien abductee and contactee from Colorado, has a video where he has a girl who is his daughter actually in the crowd show up and surprise him and speak on the microphone before running out of the room after declaring that she's his daughter or something. It's a very moving moment that was captured on video that I've seen. But these things aren't just publicized and shown to the public. You have to know about them, and you have to take this into consideration. But isn't it interesting to think, you think a gray alien and a human being would just be able to get it on and pop out a normal baby? Or do you think maybe there's some specialty laboratory stuff going on in a certain environment needs to be harbored? I mean, that's very delicate right there. Think about that. But that kind of stuff is going on, right? So this is where I'm saying it doesn't happen naturally. Things can be intervened with. DNA can be manipulated. Things can be spliced together, but it has to be done scientifically in a laboratory setting. Mother Nature's got certain parameters that they've kind of set, but I think the government is figuring out where the game ends for Mother Nature and where they can come in, and science and such can play with God's creation, play with the DNA, and cross. I mean, imagine even a human plant cross. If you've anybody who's delved into the study of ufology, I mean, deeply as I have, has certainly come across scenarios and claims of the encounter with beings that seem to be part plant, part human, part hominid, and part plant, like as though their skin would be green and it would photosynthesize a food source for them. There are stories of the gray aliens eating by dipping their fingers into a bath created from parts of living creatures essentially brewed and fermented or whatever in this liquid, and that they would get nutrition by soaking it up through their skin. And there are other claims that don't come to mind right now about these type of creatures, but I have heard a lot. I've done a lot of investigation since discovering the internet, and the algorithms on the internet did not used to be so controlling. You used to be able to go wherever you wanted on the internet, and it has certainly become just a total lockdown scenario from what it was. I can't believe what they've done with the censorship on the internet. It's astounding. Even if you try to do a search on Google or DuckDuckGo, or I'm just like, where is the, I mean, I don't go on the black web, never have, never will, but I'm just like, where is the freedom on the internet? You know what I'm saying? But they've got it on lockdown, but I'm getting off topic. So evolution is not real in the sense that it doesn't just happen. If you want to create a new creature, I guess you can, but it has to be done in a laboratory setting, and then you're starting to really tempt the forces of the universe, and karmically maybe doing a disservice through DNA will get you, whipped back by the forces of the universe. And you don't want to make Mother Nature unhappy. You don't want to mess with the forces of the universe that are beyond your control, but you should always consider that that there are other species out there that might be watching us, and those might be God's angels in the Bible. Those might be the messengers that you would be quick to discredit and poo-poo, but historically that is the answer, that those are the beings doing the intervention. There are videos of cylindrical shaped UFOs going straight into smoldering hot volcanoes and essentially quelling the fire in there somehow and stopping eruptions. And this has been documented by Jaime Maussan, who is a Spanish-speaking ufologist. In my opinion, the very best of them out there anywhere ever. I very much enjoy Jaime Maussan's videos. I think the man has the most impeccable taste for bringing the supreme evidence to the table, and he understands what holds weight, and he is a great mind that can take many things into consideration at the same time. He's a very brilliant person who I enjoy listening to for the evidence that he brings to the table, because of his really personability with the witnesses, even to get this information from them to bring to the public. Quite commendable for what he does, because there certainly is a cover-up in all things, whether it's evolution and they not wanting you to know about the truth through the control mechanism of science, whether it's politics, whether it's ufology, whether it's the military agenda on the planet. It's all interconnected. It's all interconnected. Certainly the military and the aliens are working together, and they are doing genetic manipulations and experimentations in deep underground military bases. It has been said that the whole idea of these transgender surgeries that they've come up with have been honed in and perfected on unwilling victims by military corruptors in underground base scenarios. And you know, money is the root of all evil, and the silence of their tongues and their ability to victimize others is a sickness in the minds of humanity that needs to be selectively removed from mankind. Do you know what I'm talking about? This conversation started with genetics, and it's going full circle, because the natural selection should be done by humanity, in that we shouldn't have women who will breed with violent men. We shouldn't have a society that encourages violence, and the breeding something is an analogy. It doesn't mean breeding it in a specific sense. Things can be bred. Environments can breed certain belief systems. Environments can breed a number of things. So this is it's very much an analogy, but very much a specific conversation about DNA. But the DNA of humankind has a genetic memory that we must get in touch with, that we must understand and believe in and be in contact with, so that we don't repeat the same mistakes that we've made in the past, so that we don't allow the genetic expression, so to speak, of ignorance, violence, carelessness to permeate society and continue on in the genetic line of mankind. Truly, it's a disgusting thing what was done by Hitler and the Nazis, but the philosophies of groups like the Tool Society speak to an intellect and an understanding about human DNA and the expression of humankind on this planet. We're the artistic creation, we're artistic, we're emotional, but what we really are and what we're truly made of is beyond our understanding. I'll say that because if you want to take the whole analogy of what I said about where did the DNA come from, who's creating these animals, who created humankind, who placed humankind here, and where did all these different expressions of DNA of humankind actually come from? And could it be that there are off-planet human intelligences with similar looking humans that could even blend in with us? They could be so similar looking to us, and yet that DNA was from another planet. I mean, if you were to consider these plants, for instance, and oh yes, this is a jade plant, this is a house plant, but where did it come from? Zinnia, for instance, comes from the continent of Africa, but they've been spread all over, and you can just buy a seed packet and consider it a regular garden plant. But the places in the world in which the DNA, was found and was taken to create these house plants even is all around the world. And we take that for granted, that even dogs were brought all around the world. DNA was put together, and now we find certain breeds that we've created, but we didn't really create the DNA, did we? No, we didn't. So it's just all very interesting to consider. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to leave it at that. Thanks for listening. If you made it this far, have a blessed day.